and we should spend more on defense than the entire rest of the world. Are we really that paranoid? That's like, someone who lives in a neighborhood where everybody else has a shotgun in their house, having just 50 shotguns. I support the Second Amendment, and if you want to have 50 shotguns, go ahead. But when those 50 shotguns are paid for by the public, I think that's a little bit silly. There's no reason for us as a nation to have a defense budget that is bigger than everybody else combined. That's just... During the past election, we had McCain talk about earmarks. And Obama said, well, that's great, John. Those are less than 0.2% of the budget. So you can talk about earmarks all you want, and sure, it's bad for Congress to say, okay, we're going to take this $2 billion and guarantee it goes to this cause. That's probably not a good idea. But when it's only, less than 1% of the budget, when it's like 0.2%, what are we talking about here? Let's focus on the big issues. And Senator Obama was right then, and as president, I wish he would step up on this, because what we really need to do is we need to fix Social Security and Medicare. If you don't fix those two things, even if you cut the size of the Army and the military drastically, we're still in trouble. So we really need to figure that out. And I hope those in the federal government get the gumption and the political fortitude to take this issue on. Sure, you don't want to mess with Social Security, Medicare, because old people vote. They will vote you out. If you mess with their Social Security, you are gone. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but something needs to be done, because clearly, we keep bumping into this debt ceiling. How many times are we going to do this? How much time are we going to waste dealing with this issue of, gosh, we're almost too high in debt. We got to start panicking. And then all this time is wasted discussing this issue, when really the debt ceiling shouldn't be an issue. Because we shouldn't be in debt. We as a nation should spend as much money as we take in taxes, period. We do it here at the state level, and sure, it was difficult, and unfortunately, education got cut this year at the state level. But the United States federal government needs to balance its budget. And in fact, we need a surplus, because we need to start paying back China before China starts using its treasury bonds and all the billions of dollars it has in its banks and starts buying up America. China has more bonds and dollars than Japan or any other country. And it's really scary, the power that gives them over us. They own our debt. So in order to be secure as a nation, we need to buy back that debt and ensure that we as a nation are not indebted to anyone. And the only way to ensure that we're not indebted to anyone is to not borrow any more money, which means we got to cut spending and sadly raise taxes. I'm not a big fan of raising taxes, but Bush cut taxes when we went to war. You can't do that. You can't increase spending and decrease taxes. That's not the way it works. Try going to your bank or your credit card company and say, I'm going to work less, but I want to borrow more money, and I want to do that indefinitely. They'll say, you're crazy. And Bush was crazy for doing it. So we need to reevaluate what it is that we're doing at the federal level concerning Social Security and Medicare. We need to do that immediately. And the federal government needs to get in the habit of balancing its own checkbook. If the states can do it, so can the federal government. So earlier in the broadcast, I mentioned something about sugar being the solution to your problems. For those of you who listened last week, I had Dr. Ellie Phillips on. Now, Dr. Phillips was one of the first female dentists in the United Kingdom, and she's worked as a natural dentist promoting natural healing of the tooth enamel and the natural cleaning of the mouth. She worked in Switzerland and the United Kingdom, and she now lives in New York. She told us of a fascinating discovery that she made when she was in graduate school and has been promoting it ever since. It's something called xylitol. Now, xylitol is a sugar made from birch trees, similar to how maple sugar is made from maple trees. Now, xylitol is different from regular sugar, which is sucrose. For those of you who remember chemistry, sucrose is basically fructose and glucose. Two very simple sugars. It's put together. It tastes delicious. Xylitol is not like that. And what's important is that bacteria in the mouth do not process xylitol like they do sucrose. So there are bacteria in our mouth, and they eat regular sugar. They eat sucrose. And when they eat sucrose, they excrete acid. This creates an acidic environment in our mouth. And the bacteria like this environment, and then they continue to grow more and more. As they grow, they get kind of caked onto our teeth. Once there become layers of them on our teeth, the ones in touch with the enamel are kind of covered up from the air. And so they can't do aerobic respiration, which involves oxygen. They're cut off from that. So they have to go into anaerobic respiration. When they go into that process, they emit a very strong, it's like an acid, and that attacks the tooth enamel. This is the beginning of a cavity. Now, the clumps of bacteria on your teeth that are starting to do this are called plaque. So sugar enhances this process. By eating sugar, we're giving the bacteria fuel to create an acidic environment and continue to reproduce, so eventually that they'll build up on the tooth and start attacking the enamel. Xylitol does the complete opposite. The bacteria still take it in. They think that it's sugar, but then they realize they can't process it. So what happens is they spend all of their energy trying to get rid of it, because it's like if you or I were to eat sand. It might fill us up, but we can't process it, and eventually it's going to be detrimental to us. Our body's going to try to excrete it and get rid of it. They try to get rid of the xylitol, and they end up expending their energy doing that, and they basically fall off our teeth, and our mouth gets clean. So Dr. Ellie found out that xylitol has this effect, and she's been promoting it ever since. She's created several different products, and she was very kind and gave me some. She created Zelly's xylitol mints, which are these delicious mints that you can suck on after a meal, and it will basically promote oral health after a meal. Do y'all remember those Trident commercials where it's like, Trident, when you can't brush, chew on this, Trident. Chewing Trident after meals may actually help fight cavities, so when you can't brush, chew on this, Trident. Very effective commercial. I still remember it like 10 years later. Trident just proposed that it facilitated the protection of the teeth through generating saliva. And it's true, saliva is protective of teeth. But xylitol goes that step further and actually inhibits the growth of bacteria. Now, I was so interested in this that I started doing my own research, and I'm very into the oral health aspect of public health due to water fluoridation. I'm a big opponent of water fluoridation, and I believe that we should all have clean water to drink. And if fluoride is beneficial to us, then we should have the option of consuming it. It shouldn't be put in our water by the government. Similarly, if xylitol were shown to be effective, I don't think we should put that into the water. If anything, the government should educate us about it and maybe subsidize it for our own personal use, but not mandate it for everybody across the board like they're doing with water fluoridation. So I've been researching xylitol, and I found out that xylitol also enhances the mineralization of the tooth. So our teeth are made of calcium primarily, but calcium is also bonded to phosphate. So our teeth are basically calcium phosphate, like our bones. Fluoride is beneficial on the teeth, not in water, but when in your toothpaste, because the fluoride ion becomes detached in the toothpaste and it bonds to the tooth, remineralizing it. Xylitol promotes remineralization of the tooth, but it promotes with calcium. It actually, tries to put calcium back in the tooth as opposed to fluoride, which just replaces the calcium with fluoride. So the healing that xylitol would do to your tooth is actually more natural and potentially more beneficial than the positive effects of fluoride on the tooth. Is that the known benefits of xylitol have been around for over 20 years. And yet, the American Dental Association, a professional organization who we as Americans often turn to for dental advice, they say nothing about xylitol. There's been one article published in their journal, JADA, the Journal of the American Dental Association, talking about xylitol, but they have no official policy on xylitol, which at this point I think is extremely negligent. There have been at least 20 different controlled studies on xylitol, with xylitol gum, xylitol mints. And these are unlike water fluoridation studies, which are population studies where they look at town A versus town B and try to control for differences between them and then say, oh, town A fluoridated and they have 0.5 less cavities per child, so that must be why, so water fluoridation must work. It's not a population study like this. They've done controlled, scientific, double-blind studies on xylitol and found that it works. They've employed the true scientific method, not just correlational studies. And they've found that it works. in preventing cavities. So why doesn't the American Dental Association support it? I can't answer that. I can guess. One thought is that the American Dental Association, which is a group of dentists who make their money repairing teeth, may not want the American citizens to consume xylitol because that will reduce dental decay and thus reduce their business. I hope that's not the reason. I don't have any evidence to suggest that's the reason. That's just a potential hypothesis. Other than that, you got ignorance, that maybe they don't read the other medical journals, maybe they don't read the other dental journals, maybe they've never traveled to Europe and seen that 85% of candy over there is made with xylitol. And maybe that's why they don't support xylitol. Or maybe it's just incompetence. Maybe the American Dental Association is too incompetent to realize that xylitol is beneficial and that they should recommend that we as a population consume it. These could all be possibilities. Or maybe it's in the works and they're just not telling anybody. I certainly think there's something wrong with the American Dental Association in that they continue to promote water fluoridation. There are so many studies showing the negative effects of it, and 42% of adolescents in this country, according to government statistics, have dental fluorosis. That is a direct result of overconsumption of fluoride, which is because of water fluoridation. So we know that there are harmful effects of this, and yet the American Dental Association continues to support this practice. So I have to ask you, is the American Dental Association, are they incompetent or are they evil? Do they know what they're doing, or are they just promoting what they think is in their best interest, regardless of what's in the best interest of the people? Last week, I called both the American Dental Association and the Texas Dental Association asking about xylitol and whether or not they promote it. The American Dental Association had no idea what I was talking about. I explained to the receptionist, whoever I was talking to, about xylitol. She's like, "Oh, really? That's interesting." And I spelled it out for her. She started Googling it. She's like, "Oh man, this is so interesting. I'm gonna have to start reading some of this stuff." So hopefully that'll start spreading over there. But they couldn't give me an answer about whether or not they had a policy on it. So they gave me the Texas Dental Association. I called them and they're like, "Well, you should call the American Dental Association." Well, they gave me your number. Oh, well, they shouldn't have, but we'll find out the answer for you. Their answer was, there is scientific data to support the use of xylitol in preventing cavities, but we don't have an official policy on it. And let me just tell you, I asked them about water fluoridation, and they said I said, is there a dosage that you recommend? Is there a minimum or a maximum dosage per person? And does that vary per adult or child about how much fluoride we should consume? And she put me on hold for a couple minutes and said, no, there's no recommended dosage. Now that to me is a little bit scary. I enjoyed her honesty, but that's scary that they promote a practice of putting a chemical in the water, yet there's no specified dosage of how much we should consume. I think that's a little negligent. Though she did tell me that the Texas Dental Association is currently revising their policy on water fluoridation. That is encouraging. I don't know what'll change, but maybe they'll have a more advanced warning. But that was good to hear that they're at least reconsidering it. It's only been 60 years since it was instituted. It was instituted at a time when cigarettes were promoted by doctors, and we thought that ulcers were caused by stress. And granted, that's a pretty new one. Now we know that ulcers are caused by bacteria. But medicine is constantly changing, and there's no reason to continue a practice from the 1960s when there's plenty of new evidence to suggest that it doesn't work and that it's harmful. So I'm glad to see that TDA, the Texas Dental Association, is rethinking their policy on that. One thing to consider about water fluoridation, and sugar for that matter, is that there are risk groups associated with these diseases. Now, on water fluoridation, those that consume excess water are in danger of fluoride toxicity or other side effects. So, for example, those who are diabetic, those who are pre-diabetic, which is actually almost a quarter of the population in the United States, they suffer from excess thirst. Those with kidney disease also must consume a lot of water, and if there's fluoride in it, their damaged kidneys must work extra hard to filter that out. So kidneys and diabetes sufferers must be careful of water fluoridation, and so must those with thyroid disease. Now, thyroid disease is an endocrine disease. It's the most common endocrine disease in the United States, affecting about 10% of the population, primarily women. And 80% of those with thyroid disease have hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid. One of the causes of hypothyroidism is Fluoride is overexposure to fluoride.